It started with a text I almost ignored. "You still going to the gym alone, like a psycho?" I was halfway through tying my shoes, already dreading another lonely leg day, when I saw his name pop up. Jake, my best friend since sophomore year. The guy who used to skip class with me to get greasy breakfast sandwiches, who knew every dumb insecurity I had, and somehow still decided to love me anyway. I replied with a shrug emoji and, "Yeah, why?" Three dots appeared, disappeared. Then, "Come tonight. I'll train you properly." I should have known that was the beginning of the end of me working out by myself. Jake had always been the gym guy. Broad shoulders, thick arms, that effortless confidence of someone who knows exactly what their body can do. I've been going for about 6 months at that point, mostly trying not to look lost, following routines I found on Reddit, avoiding eye contact with mirrors and men who looked like they belonged on fitness posters. Training with Jake sounded helpful, safe, normal. What it wasn't supposed to become was personal. The first night, he met me by the squat racks like he owned the place. Black tank top, gray sweats, baseball cap pulled low. He clapped me on the shoulder, casual as ever. "Jesus, man," he said, eyes flicking over me. "You've actually made progress." That alone almost made the membership worth it. We started simple. Squats, bench, rows. He stood close when he spotted me, closer than he needed to. His hand hovered near my chest, his breath warm against my ear as he counted reps. "Up. Control it. Don't rush it." I told myself I was imagining the awareness crawling up my spine every time he leaned in, that this was just what training with someone looked like. But then there were the little things. The way he'd correct my form by placing his hands directly on my hips, thumbs pressing and like he was checking alignment, but staying there a second too long. The way he'd watch me in the mirror instead of watching himself. The way he stopped joking around once we started lifting, his focus narrowing completely onto me. "You're stronger than you think," he said at one point, nodding like he'd just discovered something important. I laughed it off. "Sure, coach." He didn't smile back. After that, it became our thing. He'd text me gym times instead of asking if I wanted to hang out. If I said I'd already gone earlier in the day, he'd reply with a flat, "Next time, wait." At first, I thought it was motivation. Then it started to feel like something else. One night, I showed up late. The gym was quieter than usual, that low hum of machines and muffled music filling the space. Jake was already there, leaning against a cable machine, arms crossed. "You train without me?" he asked. I blinked. "What?" "I saw your Snapchat this morning." His jaw tightened. "Chest day, right?" I hadn't even thought about it. "Yeah, I didn't know you were coming today." He stared at me for a moment, something unreadable in his eyes. Then he stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I told you I'm training you now." It wasn't angry. That almost made it worse. During pull-downs, he stood directly behind me, knees brushing the bench, guiding the bar with his hands over mine. I could feel his chest against my back, solid and warm. Every rep dragged his body a little closer. "Feel that," he murmured. "That's how it's supposed to engage." My mouth was dry. "Yeah." He didn't move away. After the workout, I headed toward the water fountain. Jake followed, then casually tapped the back of my tank top, stopping me just long enough to make a point. "Where you going?" "Water." "You're not done." His eyes dropped to my arms, flushed and shaking. "Stretching." "You skip that when I'm not here." There it was. That phrase again. "When I'm not here." He guided me to the mats, hands firm on my shoulders as he pressed me down into a stretch. His grip lingered, thumbs digging into muscle, slow and deliberate. Anyone watching would have thought nothing of it. But nobody was watching, and the silence between us was starting to say things neither of us were ready to admit out loud. By the time we left the gym, my body felt wrecked and my head was worse. Jake walked me to my car, leaned against it like he always did, arms crossed again. "Tomorrow," he said. "Same time. I might dash." He cut me off with a look. Not harsh, just certain. "Don't work out without me." I nodded before I realized I was doing it. As I drove home, my phone buzzed. A text from Jake. "You do better when I'm there." I stared at the screen longer than I should have, my chest tight, my mind racing. Because somewhere between spotting reps and shared silence, I'd stopped asking myself why he needed to be there, and started wondering what would happen if I tried to train alone again. I told myself I was overthinking it. That's what I always did when something felt too charged, too close to the truth. I'd replay moments, flatten them out until they looked harmless. Friends spot each other. Friends get intense about routines. Friends text each other dumb, possessive sounding things sometimes. Except Jake had never sounded like that before. The next week, I didn't go to the gym alone once. Not because I couldn't, but because every time I thought about it, I imagined his face if he found out. That quiet look, the way his jaw tightened, the way he didn't raise his voice, didn't joke, just expected me to fall in line. So I waited. When we trained together, he pushed me harder. More weight, slower reps, less talking. He watched everything, my breathing, my grip, the way my legs shook on the last set. Don't lock out, he said, hand pressing against my knee. You're compensating. His palm stayed there while I finished the rep. I caught him staring at me more when he thought I wouldn't notice. Between sets, in reflections. Once, when I was toweling sweat off my neck, I glanced up and saw him looking at my throat like he'd forgotten where he was. He looked away instantly. That night, in the locker room, I mentioned casually that I might start coming in early some mornings. Before work, just to fit things in. Jake didn't even pretend to be cool about it. Without me, he asked. I shrugged, forcing a laugh. Dude, it's just lifting. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. I told you, you rush when I'm not there. I've been lifting on my own for months. And now you're actually getting results, he shot back. Coincidence. There was again. That line he kept drawing without ever naming it. The next morning, I went anyway. I didn't tell him. Didn't post anything. Just slipped into the gym at 6 a.m., half asleep, headphones in. It felt good, quiet, anonymous. Like I was reclaiming something small but important. I was midway through my second set when my phone buzzed. Jake, you at the gym? My stomach dropped. I stared at the message, pulse pounding louder than the music in my ears. I didn't reply. Finished my set. Wiped my hands. Tried to breathe like I hadn't been caught doing something wrong. Another buzz. Answer me. That one made my hand shake. I left 10 minutes later, heart racing the whole drive home. He didn't text again. Not that morning. Not that afternoon. By the time evening rolled around, I was convinced I'd messed something up beyond repair. Then there was a knock on my door. I opened it to find Jake standing there, hoodie pulled on, gym bag slung over his shoulder like he'd just come straight from a workout. His expression wasn't angry. It was worse. You go without me, he said. Not a question. I crossed my arms, suddenly defensive. Yeah, I told you I might. No, he replied quietly. You didn't. The hallway felt too small, too quiet. You didn't answer my texts, he continued, eyes locked on mine. Why? I swallowed. Because I didn't want to deal with this. His brow furrowed. Deal with what? I hesitated, then said it. You acting like I need permission. Something shifted in his face. Not denial. Not surprise. Recognition. He stepped inside without asking, letting the door close behind him. We stood there, barely a foot apart. I'm not trying to control you, he said, voice low. I'm trying to keep you from getting hurt. It's lifting, I snapped. Not a war zone. His hands clenched at his sides. You don't know what you're doing when you're tired. I do now. Silence stretched between us, thick and uncomfortable. I could feel my heartbeat in my ears. Then he said, almost under his breath, I don't like when I'm not there. I stared at him. Why? He didn't answer right away. His gaze dropped to my chest, my arms, like he was grounding himself. Finally, because other guys watch you. The words landed hard. I laughed, sharp and incredulous. You're joking. He wasn't smiling. I see it, he said. The way they look at you. The way you don't notice. My chest tightened. That's not your problem. His jaw flexed. It feels like it is. Neither of us moved. The line was right there now. Clear. Blazing. And the worst part? Neither of us stepped back. The silence after that felt heavier than anything we'd said. I shifted first, stepping back just enough to breathe. Jake, you don't get to decide who looks at me. I'm not deciding, he said quickly. I'm no Utison. That's not better. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing once across my living room like he needed movement or he'd explode. This wasn't supposed to get like this. What was it supposed to be? I asked. He stopped, turned to face me. Simple. I let out a short laugh. Nothing about this feels simple. Another pause. Then quieter, I know. We didn't go to the gym together for 3 days after that. It was the longest stretch we'd gone without talking since we met. I told myself I was relieved, that the tension had snapped and now we could reset. Be normal again. Best friends who didn't hover inches from each other in mirrors or argue about who had the right to spot whose body. But the relief never came. Instead, everything felt hollow, like I'd lost something I hadn't realized I was holding on to all the time. On the fourth day, I was mid-set on shoulder press when I felt that awareness again. The kind that makes your skin tighten before your brain catches up. I looked to my left. Jake stood by the dumbbells, watching me. He hadn't texted, hadn't warned me, just showed up. My arms nearly gave out. He didn't approach right away, just stood there, arms crossed, eyes tracking every rep like he used to. When I finished, I racked the weight harder than necessary and turned to him. "You stalking me now?" I asked, trying for light, missing by a mile. "No," he said. I waited. "For what?" "For you to look like that again." He gestured vaguely at me, like you're about to hurt yourself to prove a point. I wiped sweat from my face. "I'm Fine." He stepped closer. Not too close. "Careful this time. You're stronger when you don't rush." "You keep saying that." "Because it's true." I should have told him to leave. Should have grabbed my bag and walked out. Instead, I sighed and said, "Are you training me or just criticizing now?" Something like relief flickered across his face. "Both." We fell back into rhythm like nothing had happened. That was the scariest part. No epalegi, no resolution, just familiarity sliding back into place. But things were different. He didn't touch me as much. When he corrected my form, he hovered instead of grabbing. His eyes still tracked me, but there was restraint there now, like he was gripping something invisible and refusing to let go. Until someone else stepped in. Some guy tall, blonde, annoyingly friendly asked me how many sets I had left on the bench. We chatted between reps, nothing special. Normal gym small talk. Jake appeared beside us without a word. "He's got 2 left," Jake said, voice even. The guy glanced between us. "Oh, my bad. Didn't realize." Jake didn't correct him. After the guy left, I rounded on Jake. "What was that?" He shrugged. "Efficiency. You didn't need to answer for me." "I know." "Then why dash?" "I didn't like how he was looking at you," he said flat. I stared. "You're doing it again." His jaw tightened. "I stopped you from rushing." "That's not what that was." He leaned closer, voice low. "You want me to pretend I don't see it?" "Yes," I snapped. "That's exactly what I want." He held my gaze for a long second. Then he stepped back, hands up. "Fine." But the air between us stayed, charged the rest of the workout. Every glance felt deliberate. Every silence felt loud. As we were leaving, Jake spoke again. "I don't care what you do," he said, staring straight ahead. "Just don't shut me out." I swallowed. "Then stop acting like I belong to you." He stopped walking. I turned. He looked at me with something raw in his eyes, fear, maybe, or frustration, or something neither of us had a name for yet. "I'm trying," he said. "I just don't know where the line is anymore." Neither did I, and that was the problem. The line didn't just blur after that. It started moving. A few nights later, Jake texted me late. "Leg day tomorrow. Don't go without me." I stared at the message longer than I should have. I knew what pushing back would do. I also knew what giving in meant. I replied I wasn't planning to. 3 dots appeared almost instantly. Good. Something about that word made my chest tighten. At the gym the next evening, he was different again. Calmer. Focused. Like he'd made a decision and stuck to it. No hovering. No territorial comments. Just instructions, counts, nods of approval. It almost made me relax. Until we got to Bulgarian split squats. "You've been cheating these," he said, setting up a bench. "Balance is off." "I'm not cheating," I said, but stepped into position anyway. "Trust me," he replied. "I'll stabilize you." He crouched behind me, hands hovering near my hips. I lowered into the first rep and immediately wobbled. Before I could correct, his hands closed around my waist. Firm, anchoring, not just guiding, holding. "Jake," I said under my breath. "Stay with me," he replied. "I've got you." I finished the rep, then another. His grip never loosened. People moved around us. Music thumped. Plates clanged. But my entire world narrowed down to the heat of his hands and the way my body responded without permission. When I stood up, I turned too fast and nearly collided with him. We froze, inches apart, breathing the same air. "You good?" he asked quietly. I nodded. "Yeah." Neither of us moved. His eyes flicked to my mouth, then back up, like he was checking himself. He stepped back first. The rest of the workout passed in a strange, muted haze. We barely spoke. When we finished, Jake grabbed his bag and said, "Locker room," like it was nothing. I followed. The locker room was mostly empty late enough that the after-work crowd had cleared out. Jake tossed his bag onto the bench and stripped his shirt off without hesitation. I tried not to look. Failed. His back was slick with sweat, muscles flexing as he reached for a towel. I felt stupidly aware of my own body, of the way my shirt clung to me. "You showering?" he asked. "Yeah." We ended up under adjacent streams, steam filling the tiled room. I kept my eyes forward, water pounding against my shoulders. Then Jake spoke. "You ever think about how close we got?" he asked casually. My heart skipped. "About what?" "The other night. At your place." A pause. Before it got weird. "It was weird," he hummed. "Didn't feel wrong." I swallowed hard. "Jake." He turned his head slightly, not fully looking at me. "I'm asking." I shut the water off, grabbing my towel. "I think we crossed something." He did turn then. His expression wasn't defensive. It was honest. "Yeah," he said. "I think we did too." We stood there dripping, towels low on our hips, the space between us humming. "And?" he asked. "And we can't keep pretending it didn't happen." A slow nod. "Agreed." For a second, I thought that was it. Closure. Boundaries. Then he said, "But I don't want to stop training you." My pulse spiked. "That's not the same thing." "I know," he said quietly. "That's why I'm asking." Asking what? Exactly, neither of us said. We finished getting dressed in silence. Outside, night air cool against my overheated skin, Jake walked me to my car like always. Before I got in, he spoke again. "I won't stop you from training alone," he said, "if that's what you want." I met his eyes. "And if it's not?" His mouth twitched just barely. "Then I'm there." I drove home with my heart in my throat. Because the truth was, I didn't want him to stop. I just didn't know how much closer we could get before something broke. I tried training alone again after that. Not right away. I waited 2 days, let the soreness fade, let the tension settle into something I could pretend was normal. I picked a time I knew Jake hated late morning, when he was usually at work. It should have felt freeing. Instead, the gym felt wrong. Too quiet. Too open. I rushed my reps without meaning to, caught myself checking my form in the mirror like I was waiting for him to shake his head and correct me. Halfway through deadlifts, I stopped and laughed under my breath. This was ridiculous. I was loading plates when I felt someone step into my space. Close enough that I didn't need to turn to know who it was. "You're rounding your back," Jake said. I closed my eyes for a second. "You have a sixth sense or something?" "No," he replied. "You're predictable." I turned. "I didn't tell you I was coming." "You didn't have to." He nodded at the bar. "Reset. I'll spot." "I thought you said you'd stop showing up." "I said I wouldn't stop you," he corrected. "There's a difference." I should have argued. Instead, I exhaled and stepped back into position. He crouched beside me, hand hovering near my lower back, not touching, but close enough that I felt it anyway. "Brace," he said. "Now pull." The lift felt cleaner. Stronger. I hated how much I needed that. After, we sat on the floor against the wall, backs to the mirrors, catching our breath. Sweat dripped down my neck, my arms trembling. "You did better today," Jake said. "Because you showed up." He glanced at me. "Or because you wanted me to." That landed somewhere deep and uncomfortable. We didn't talk much after that. Just trained. Walked out together. Like we'd settled into an unspoken agreement neither of us wanted to define. The next shift came quietly. Jake started asking about my day again. Not just gym stuff, work stress, family, dumb things I'd seen online. And I noticed something else. When other guys talked to me now, he didn't intervene. He watched. Always. But he didn't step in. It almost felt like trust. Until one night, after a brutal session, he invited me back to his place. "Protein shakes," he said, "and my couch isn't trying to kill me." I hesitated, then nodded. His apartment smelled like laundry detergent and coffee. Familiar. Comfortable. We sat side by side, legs brushing, scrolling through something dumb on TV. At some point, I realized my head had tipped toward his shoulder. I didn't move away. Neither did he. You know, he said softly, eyes still on the screen. I've never trained anyone like this. I swallowed. Like what? Like I care if they show up without me. My chest tightened. Jake. He turned to face me fully this time. I don't want to cage you. I just dashed. He stopped. Exhaled. I don't want to lose whatever this is. I looked at him. Really looked. At the tension he carried so quietly. At the way he was trying, genuinely, not to cross a line he didn't know how to name. I don't want to lose it either, I admitted. The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It was fragile. He lifted his hand slowly, deliberately, and rested it over mine. Not gripping. Just there. Then we need to be honest, he said. My pulse roared in my ears. About what? His thumb brushed my knuckles, barely a movement. Why it matters so much when you don't train alone anymore. I didn't pull away. I also didn't answer. Because I finally understood something we'd both been circling for weeks. The gym was never the point. It was just the place we kept finding excuses to touch, to watch, to care without admitting we already had. And now, there was nowhere left to hide from that. Once it was out there that it mattered, everything slowed down. Not in a dramatic way. More like we both became careful, aware that every word now carried weight. Jake's hand stayed over mine for a long second longer. Then he let go like he didn't trust himself to linger. We didn't talk about it that night. He walked me to my car, like always. No possessive comments. No instructions. Just a quiet, text me when you get home. I did. The next week felt like standing on a fault line. At the gym, we kept things clean. Professional, almost. He spotted when I asked. He corrected verbally more than physically. When he did touch me, it was quick, purposeful, like he was proving to me or himself that he could. And I noticed something else. He let me go alone. Not once, not twice, but 3 times. No texts. No surprise appearances. Just space. It should have reassured me. Instead, I missed him so badly it was embarrassing. On the 4th solo workout, I was halfway through curls when someone tapped my shoulder. I turned, expecting Jake out of habit. It wasn't him. The guy smiled, introduced himself, asked about my routine. Normal, friendly, harmless. We talked for a few minutes, laughed at something dumb. And that's when I saw Jake. Across the room. He wasn't watching me. He was watching us. He didn't interrupt, didn't approach, didn't even frown. He just stood there, jaw tight, hands gripping his water bottle like it had personally offended him. I excused myself and walked over. You okay? I asked. He nodded once. Yeah. You sure? Yep. We trained together after that, but something had shifted again. Not tension this time, distance. Like he put himself on a leash and was holding it too tight. As we were leaving, I stopped him by my car. You don't have to pretend you don't care, I said. He sighed, leaning back against the door. I'm not pretending. You were across the room. I noticed. And I didn't step in, he said quietly. Isn't that what you wanted? I hesitated. I wanted you to trust me. He met my eyes. Ido. That wasn't the problem, and we both knew it. The breaking point came a few nights later. We were stretching, gym nearly empty, lights dimmed for closing. Jake was sitting across from me, elbows on his knees, watching me roll out my hamstrings. You remember when you first started? He said suddenly. I smiled. You mean when I had no idea what I was doing? You still don't, he teased, then softened. But you were closed off, kept your head down, didn't let anyone see you. I shrugged. That was the point. He nodded slowly. You don't do that anymore. I looked up. Is that bad? No, he said quickly. Then after a beat, it's just different. We packed up in silence. Outside, the air was cool, sharp with the smell of rain. Jake didn't walk away right away. I need to say something, he said. My heart jumped. Okay. He took a breath. When I told you not to train alone, it wasn't about control. I know. It was about wanting to be the one you trusted, he continued. The one you looked for. I swallowed. You are. He shook his head. I don't want to replace your independence. I want to be included in it. The honesty in his voice knocked the air out of me. I don't need you to stop being you, I said. I just don't want to feel like I disappear when I don't show up next to you. He stepped closer, not invading, just honest. You don't disappear, he said. That's the problem. I laughed softly, nerves and relief tangled together. So, where does that leave us? He didn't answer right away. Then he said, I don't want to draw lines anymore. I met his gaze. Neither do I. We stood there, close enough that I could feel his warmth again, the way I always did. Not crossing anything, just finally standing on the same side of it. And for the first time since this all started, it didn't feel like something was about to break. It felt like something was finally about to begin. After that night, nothing official changed, which somehow made everything change. Jake stopped telling me when it come to the gym. I stopped waiting for his text to decide my schedule. And still somehow we kept showing up at the same times more often than not. Not because either of us said it out loud, just because we both wanted to. When we trained, there was a new ease between us. Less tension, more awareness. Like we'd acknowledged the current running underneath and decided not to fight it or drown in it. The jealousy didn't disappear. It just got quieter. One afternoon, we were doing back rows, pull-ups, all the stuff that made my arms feel like jelly. Jake was spotting me on pull-ups, hands at my ribs, lifting just enough to help me clear the bar. Again, he said, you've got one more. I pulled, shaking, teeth clenched. Jake, I groaned. I'm done. You're not, he said calmly. I won't let you drop. And I realized something in that moment. I trusted him. Completely. I let go at the top, breath ragged, and instead of falling, I felt his arms lock around my torso, solid and sure, easing me down like it was the most natural thing in the world. We stood there for a second afterward. Too close. My hands still gripping the bar, his chest against my back. You okay? He asked quietly. Yeah, I said. You? He exhaled a laugh. Barely. That night, we sat on the hood of my car in the parking lot, legs dangling, sipping protein shakes neither of us actually liked. You ever think about what would have happened if we never went to the gym together? I asked. He tilted his head. I think we would have found another excuse. I smiled. Probably. He looked at me, then not intense, not guarded. Just open. I don't want to pretend anymore, he said. My heart started racing. Pretend what? That this is just about lifting, a beat, or friendship. I didn't joke, didn't deflect. I just asked, what do you want it to be? He thought for a long moment. Then something we choose, not something that just happens to us. I nodded slowly. Okay. We sat in silence, the kind that feels full instead of awkward. Then he reached out, hesitant for the first time since I'd known him, and brushed his knuckles against mine. I turned my hand over. He didn't pull away. The kiss when it happened wasn't dramatic. No fireworks. No urgency. Just him leaning in, checking my face one last time, and then the soft press of his mouth against mine. Careful. Questioning. I answered by kissing him back. He let out a breath like he'd been holding it for months. We pulled apart slowly, foreheads touching, both smiling a little like idiots. So I said, guess I'm not training alone anymore. He laughed, low and relieved. Only if you don't want to. I met his eyes. I don't. And this time when he said, good, it didn't feel like control. It felt like choice. We didn't tell anyone right away. Not because we were hiding at least, not from each other, but because it felt like something that needed to breathe first. Like if we said it out loud too soon, it might turn into something loud and fragile instead of what it was becoming. Steady. The gym changed again after that. Jake didn't hover anymore. He didn't need to. When he spotted me, it was with the easy confidence of someone who knew exactly when to step in and when to let go. Sometimes he didn't even look at me between sets, trusting that I had it. That trust did more for me than any routine ever had. I trained alone sometimes, on purpose, and when I told him afterward, he'd just nod and ask how it went. No edge, no tensión, just interest. And when we trained together, it felt intimate in a way that didn't need touching to be felt. Shared looks, quiet encouragement, a hand on my back that meant I'm here, not your mind. One night, a guy flirted with me near the water fountain. I noticed Jake watching, but instead of tightening, he smiled. When I walked back over, he bumped my shoulder. You get hit on more now, he said. I raised an eyebrow. You jealous? He shook his head. Nah, just proud. That was the moment I realized how far we'd come. It wasn't about exclusivity or control anymore. It was about choosing each other again and again without fear. Months later, someone at the gym joked, "You two still inseparable or what?" Jake glanced at me before answering, always checking in. I smiled first. "We just train well together." Jake grinned. "Yeah, that." Sometimes, late at night, when we're lying on his couch sore and quiet, he'll press his forehead to mine and say, "You know I never wanted to cage you." I know I'll tell him, "You just didn't want to lose me." And he didn't. Because what started as physical closeness and jealousy turned into something stronger: respect, honesty, and a kind of love that didn't need rules to survive. I still go to the gym. I just don't feel alone there anymore.